นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ
The Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which we've just been chanting, is one of what we call the cardinal discourses of the Buddha, the fundamental, the most important, and we believe it to be the first discourse that the Buddha gave after his enlightenment, and so it was the creation of the sutta says, a vast, immeasurable light, which outshone the light of all the devas, all the deities. And the teaching here is compared to a wheel, the setting in motion of the wheel of Dhamma. And the wheel rolls and rolls and rolls, and there's no reason for it to stop rolling, because the truths that the Buddha pointed to, illuminated in this discourse, are truths of the human condition. And the Buddha, from this very first discourse, begins with his analysis of the human condition, rather than giving a very inspiring, poetic exposition of the nature of Nibbana, or trying to capture that which is beyond words in words. He starts off by talking about what it's like to be a human being, what it's like to live in this realm, this world. And the Four Noble Truths are the form in which he chose to present his teaching. And the Four Noble Truths is the abiding principle or abiding structure that we can determine in the Buddha's teachings throughout the following 45 years, for the whole period of his teaching, his dispensation. And his teaching, the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, is in one sense quite straightforward, but the profundity comes through the penetration of the meaning of the words. It's not there's not such a lot to remember or have to memorize, but the practice is one of putting these teachings to the test and using them to examine our experience, and then in our daily lives, whatever our mood might be, whatever our practice is like, whether it's we feel that it's going well or it's not going very well at all, we can still have a feeling of it's confirming and strengthening our confidence and our faith in the truth of these teachings. They're confirming to us the truths of the in the four Arya Satya, or the Four Noble Truths. And in terms of practice, the second half of the sutta, where the Buddha expands on the Four Noble Truths into 12 different aspects. This is extremely useful for our understanding of these truths. And the Buddha is saying that before he was enlightened, he was still unaware of these Four Noble Truths and 12 aspects, and he equates his enlightenment with the understanding of these 12 aspects. So the understanding of dukkha as dukkha, this is the understanding there is dukkha, and that life of an unenlightened human being is always accompanied by some level of dukkha. And this point is already, I think, worthy of a lot of reflection, because although we may find that not a particularly difficult concept to accept, emotionally we often do feel that we shouldn't suffer, and depression or dissatisfaction with suffering, or feeling guilty when we suffer, compounds the suffering. And we don't see suffering as the noble truth of suffering. We experience suffering as my suffering, and the perception of suffering as my suffering is not the penetration of the first noble truth. So even though few people in the world would quarrel with the assertion that they experience some suffering from time to time, they experience it as being their suffering, and perhaps they seek to deny it, or to ignore it, or to indulge in it, or to feel guilty about it. But there is a sense of ownership, a sense of resentment, why me, or a feeling that it should be better than this. The first noble truth is that this is suffering, just this plain awareness. This is what happens when you take birth in this human form, when your mind is still untrained, still is prey to defilements. You experience physical pain, you experience mental pain, you attach to things, you experience sense of inner lack, inner emptiness, to one degree or another. The Buddha just therefore taught us to stop and look at our life as unenlightened human beings. This is dukkha, and learning from ourselves and learning from others. Not looking at others in order to find fault or to compare and feel intimidated or inadequate, but to see this universal suffering nature of sentient beings, and seeing suffering as suffering, then compassion arises, compassion for ourselves, compassion for others, and the arising of compassion is an indication that we are beginning to understand dukkha as dukkha. So the Buddha said the duty, the responsibility, or the practice to be developed with regard to dukkha is the recognition, the comprehension, the full comprehension of dukkha. Now, if we recognize dukkha and try to get rid of dukkha, then we're on the wrong track. We don't get rid of dukkha. We don't abandon dukkha, because dukkha is the result. We seek to comprehend dukkha as dukkha. The Buddha is the first insight, first noble truth recognition. This is dukkha. This is the noble truth of dukkha, of sentient beings. And the second insight, understanding, is that dukkha is something to be comprehended. And this third insight was, I have comprehended it. It has been comprehended. And the second noble truth, that of craving. And craving is that that wanting, that craving which accompanies ignorance. So whenever the word tanha, or craving, is used, then ignorance there is in brackets. Ignorance is always implied, because tanha is ignorant desire. It is avijja tanha. It is tanha which arises from, is rooted in ignorance, lack of understanding, or wrong understanding, wrong view. And it's this which is to be abandoned. And the Buddha, the insight, understands the causal nature, that suffering, this universal characteristic of suffering, is not something which merely has to be accepted. Don't just have to grit our teeth and bear it, because it is produced through causes and conditions. And the causal condition which is most relevant to the practice of abandoning dukkha is tanha, which in itself is an expression of the active expression of ignorance. And the Buddha realizes the relationship between ignorant desire, or tanha, and suffering. It's the insight into the second noble truth. And he has the insight that this is what needs to be abandoned. This is where the work has to be done. The abandonment of craving. He understands the nature of craving. He understands the different kinds of craving. And he understands this is what has to be abandoned. So what are the different kinds of craving? The craving for sensual objects, the craving of to see forms, to hear sounds, and so on. If we make no effort to restrain the contact with sense objects, we are usually unaware of the force of this desire. But if you make it a goal or a practice to be restrained, the senses, you can see that it's not only that you want to see beautiful things or interesting or stimulating things, but sometimes just you want to see something. If you try to keep your eyes downcast in a very stimulating environment, sometimes you can feel something just pulling your eyes upwards. You can feel this actual power of tanha. It's the desire to see. And the more interesting and the more stimulating it is, the stronger that power is. the desire to hear, the desire to smell, to taste, to touch, this idea that somehow through sense activity we live, we're real. We're real because we see, we hear, we taste, we touch. And the more intensely we see, we hear, we touch, the more intensely we exist. So there's this constant craving for intensity of experience in the world. And I'm an aficionado of the little reviews that they put on the back of books, and how I like to see what words they use to praise books. It's a very shorthand, very easy way to find the values of a culture. And I noticed 10 years ago, suddenly this word disturbing started to appear on the back of books. A brilliant, disturbing book. And I realized that this was obviously a word of praise, because otherwise it wouldn't have been chosen to be put on as an advertisement on the back of a paperback book. It's irreverent and disturbing. It's at the highest praise for a book in the 80s. It's early 90s. So the idea that the more you experience the senses, and the higher your threshold becomes, and you seek more intense, and anything that can somehow disturb your apathy or create some kind of ripple of response is it's worthy of interest. There's something going on there. This craving for sense pleasure. This is the expression of ignorance. This is what has to be abandoned. Of course, you don't abandon living in a world of form, sounds, odors, and so on. But it's this, what we're seeking to abandon is this conditioned, puppet-like, Pavlovian response to the sense world. Seeking to be free within the sense world, and that requires faith, commitment, and a willingness to go against some very deep instincts and conditioned drives. But of course it can be done. So this is a point in practice that we come to when it sort of sorts people out, where you come to the realization that beyond a certain point of practice, beyond the point of making your mind kind of peaceful and relaxed, that any real progress to be made comes through the willingness to renounce. Just not renouncing the things, the unpleasant, unsettling, disturbing mental states, but being willing to renounce the pleasant mental states, the things that you actually enjoy. Ajahn Jayasaro was talking about peace, and he says it's peace from, or sangop jak, and it's peace from pleasure and pain, peace from like and dislike. If you think that you can practice in such a way to separate yourself on a permanent basis from the things that you don't like, the things that cause you fear and anxiety and pain, and take refuge in the pleasant and the enjoyable aspects of experience, then this is what we call practicing in order to be reborn in heaven realm. This is not practicing for freedom or for enlightenment, because the heaven realm is the realm of the exclusively pleasant. And so if you practice like that, then you'll die, and then you can go up into a heaven realm and spend an eon picking flowers and making daisy chains and frolicking in the woods. And then one day you notice that the daisies are starting to wither, and you realize your body is starting to emit an odor, and your visa is about to run out. And that's it. That's it. That's all you get. So the Buddhist take on this is that spiritual practice should lead to something more than eons of making daisy chains in pleasant existences in heavenly realms, and these realms are impermanent, and the way out of the whole mess is the courage to go beyond the whole dual realm, not just the black but also the white, and not just the things we dislike but also our likes, attachments. So the heart of renunciation is that which really fuels the practice after the initial stages of just settling the mind a bit and going beyond the grosser forms of greed and hatred. And the desire, the craving to become, to be someone. And in America, women, I don't remember where it was, someone was telling this child, somewhere that I can't remember where I was, somewhere, telling this child, look, you may be poor, but you can be somebody. You can really be somebody. If you want to be somebody, you can be somebody. And so this is the kind of the goal of a culture, to be somebody. And it's a pretty sad way to live your life, to striving to be somebody or to become somebody. And that gets expressed as desire to be loved, desire to be appreciated, desire to be wanted, desire to be needed, needing to be needed. And with that comes the obverse, the fear of not being somebody, the fear of not being needed, the fear of disappearing without trace on the sands of time. This guy in America years ago who assassinated some political figure, and they caught him, and he shouted out and said, "Now I'm 1,000th part of history." So it was worth it, so he could get his name in the papers and be somebody for a while, afraid he's going to die and nobody will know his name. But you see, it's not necessary to have to live that way. This is very much expression of bhava tanha, which has become very much exaggerated and manic over the past 100, 200 years. You can see how alien it was to people even in Western cultures before Industrial Revolution. The Great Cathedrals, probably the greatest artistic creation. The Middle Ages, nobody ever thought about recording the architects and the craftsmen and the great art of the East, paintings. Nobody ever thought to write their name in the corner of the painting before. I don't know when it started, but or the great Buddha images in Thailand. You can't look around the back and see someone just etched their name of the man who designed it or cast it. People weren't interested in that. So Buddha said that we have to study and understand the nature of craving, and to seek to abandon it, to go against it, and Ajahn Chah's very forthright about this, saying, the way he says such things sometimes, and just the hair on your back bristle, when you hear something, and at that moment, I'll never forget this, and I can remember him just sort of looking really fierce and saying, if you're still following your desires, you haven't even started to practice, he said. And no matter how geng you think you are, he said, if you're still following your likes, if you're still following your dislikes, he says, you don't know, you haven't started. Because that's the very essence, the very structure of the dukkha machine, is where is your attitude to your likes and dislikes, and whether you're willing to go against them, whether you're willing to thwart them. And because craving is a conditioned phenomena also, we don't have this model of, you're going to screw yourself up if you don't express your desires all the time. It's not that you're just holding something down which has got energy. The moment you take your hand off it, it's going to spring up. But it's like a moving ball or something, a bouncing ball. If you just put it down and hold it, it stops. You can arrest the motion of things if you do it wisely, correctly. So you see, with the Four Noble Truths, you're getting this basic structure, an idea of, independently of what particular meditation object you're using, it's always got to come back to these Four Noble Truths. You're seeking to comprehend dukkha as dukkha. You're seeking to abandon craving and all the different cravings that can come up. Whether craving for material things, craving for foods, craving for sexual excitement, interest, experience, craving for sense objects of any kind, craving for mental images, trawling back through your memories for pleasant experiences and just dwelling with them, imagination, expectation, anticipation, grasping onto these things and holding on to them. And this is where you leave home. Yes, the leaving home means when you find yourself taking a refuge in something which is subject to arising and passing away, and holding on to that, and rationalizing it or whatever. But when you see that, I'm willing just to put something down, willing to go against that. The Buddha, so this is the second noble truth, that suffering is dependent on craving, craving something to be abandoned. He looked in his heart. He said, have I abandoned craving? He said, yes, no craving. The third noble truth, the truth of cessation, truth of liberation. So there's suffering and its cause, and there is the ending of suffering, absolute cessation of suffering, without remainder. And so this is the goal of practice. The Buddha has defined the illness, defined the cause of the illness. Now he defines the state of freedom from illness, the state of perfect health, and affirms that it is something which can be realized. It's sanditiko, it's something which is within the capacity of a human being to penetrate, to illuminate, to make clear. And Nibbana is the deathless element, but it's also the birthless element. It's not that you bring Nibbana into into existence. It's an overturning of something which has been upturned, a righting of something which has been wronged, shining light into the darkness and illuminating that which has been there already, always. So this liberation, this freedom is something which Buddha realized is something which should be realized. To be born as a human being, and we make the best of this short time that we have through this search for liberation. And the Buddha looked in his heart and he said, yes, I've realized this. And how had he realized it? He goes on from there, fourth noble truth, the Eightfold Path. So this comprehensive training, education of every aspect of our life. This is not just a matter of sitting, walking, and meditation, as we know. It covers every single aspect of our life. And this is, in one way, a simple point, but also one in which we can often forget, and the practice can become rather uneven. As someone was saying the other day, some people who spend a lot of time in solitude, spend a lot of time in meditation, but when they come out of it, they find their speech can be very insensitive, hurtful, never developed right speech, never developed the ability to use the speech faculty for the benefit of themselves and others. In the Eightfold Path, we have the threefold training of Sila, Samadhi, Panya expanded. The slight difference being that here, Sammaditthi, Sammasankappa, right view, right aspiration come at the beginning. These two elements of the Noble Path are the wisdom faculty. So here, rather than Sila, Samadhi, Panya, we have wisdom, Sila, Samadhi. Here the emphasis is on establishing spiritual practice on right view, right understanding. Again, reminded of Ajahn Jayasaro and his continual stress on meditation practice being founded on right view and Patimokkha Samvara Sila, keeping of the Patimokkha rules and the core wat and the Tudonga wat. And right view here, having strong, firm faith in the power of intentional action. Good actions have good results, bad actions have bad results. Faith in the capacity of human being, faith in the capacity of oneself to realize enlightenment. Having the right aspiration, which flows naturally from this kind of right view, is thoughts which are free from sensuality, non-sensual thoughts, wholesome thoughts, thoughts of kindness and compassion, preventing the mind from proliferating in sensual matters, sexual matters, and with negativity and cruelty in the mind. These this basic setting up of the mind, giving it a firm foundation in terms of view, so that when we start to practice meditation, our meditation is not sidetracked. Don't get caught in aiming at particular mental states and maintaining them, or not getting caught up in desire for psychic powers or to become somebody special, but have a clear understanding of the role of meditation practice as giving the mind the clarity, stillness, happiness, stability, which will provide the necessary foundation and base for development of wisdom. Wisdom is that which removes or destroys defilements, but wisdom wisdom faculty, vipassana, can only take place when the mind is calm. Just as if we're going to perform an operation, a doctor's going to perform an operation, it's very helpful for him if the patient is anesthetized, if the patient is thrashing around on the operating table. It would be very difficult for him to get the scalpel in the right place. And having anesthetized the patient, the surgeon is able to perform very delicate operations and open up the body and cut this off and stick this onto that, do all kinds of things. Which he couldn't do if the body was thrashing about. So the samadhi is that which stills, calms the body and calms the mind, prepares it for use of wisdom. So wisdom is the foundation, and is also the culmination of the path. The other important factor is the sila, and this is something that I'm sure all of you have noticed, that living in this environment are, even though you may not feel that you're also very, very peaceful, your mind is very much more sensitive than it is outside, and even minor fractions of monastic discipline or acting or speaking in unskillful ways leave a trace in the mind, have a detrimental effect on meditation. Your mind can just grab onto something and spend a whole meditation section just feeling anxious or feeling self-aversion because of something that you've done or said, or perhaps the mind grasps onto something somebody else has done or said, and has definitely ill effects on your meditation practice. So the sense of self-respect and ease of mind through scrupulous attention to actions and speech is very supportive of the samadhi practice. The whole eightfold path, using your mind, using the thinking mind to develop this basic right understanding, taking Buddhist teachings on trust, taking them as working hypothesis, to give you the necessary foundation, scrupulous attention to one's sila, precepts, and then the effort in the samadhi section of the Eightfold Path, divided into right effort, right mindfulness, right samadhi. So this constant effort in all postures to be abandoning the unwholesome, protecting the mind, not letting unwholesome dhammas that have not yet arisen to arise, creating wholesome dhammas in the mind, and supporting and developing those which have risen already. Mindfulness, all postures, mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of consciousness and states of consciousness, mindfulness of hindrances and enlightenment factors. It's constant effort to be mindful, and then putting effort in the meditation practice, taking up the meditation object with respect, application, and with firm belief that the development of this meditation object can lead you out of dukkha to liberation. Have developed this confidence in your meditation object. And then using the meditation object to gradually abandon hindrances, keeping the mind in the present moment, abandoning, renouncing attachment, interest in the past and the future, being quite resolute about that, being content, developing the sense of content consciously, developing the sense of contentment with the present moment, with the meditation object. Using skillful means to deal with different hindrances that arise before a meditation session starts, and be aware of the state of your mind, what particular hindrance is likely to arise in this meditation, and you're prepared for that. Allowing, if you're feeling dull, sleepy, then prepare yourself to apply antidotes to that, or to prevent that sleepiness from overcoming your mind. If your mind's very agitated, then apply antidotes to that. Actually moving towards peace, towards the clarity, stillness, serenity, peaceful mind. It's leading on to samadhi, when the mind enters the first jhana, the second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. If it doesn't reach that level, then it's on that path. It's in harmony with that path. It's developing the movement away from sensuality, movement away from unwholesome dhammas, in sense of contentment and happiness, joy to be able to tread this path each step of the way. So finding joy in each step of the path, even before you reach the samma samadhi, samma vimutti, then even in the struggling stage, we can bring up the sense of joy and gratitude that we have the opportunity to practice in this way. So the Eightfold Path is something to be developed. Buddha realized the Eightfold Path, all the various aspects of the practice which need to be developed. This is what needs to be done. And of course he realized that he had done this. So taking this basic structure for ourselves, you see, our duty is to comprehend the nature of dukkha as it is. Dukkha as dukkha, not my dukkha or your dukkha. Seek to understand the nature of craving, recognize the nature of craving in all its various guises. Seek to abandon it. Seek to move away from confusion and attachment towards peace and liberation, freedom. Seek to uncover that freedom, reveal it, and study the Eightfold Path, know it thoroughly, and seek to put each aspect of Noble Path into action, develop the Eightfold Path. These are the heart of the teachings that the Buddha gave to the 5 ascetics in the deer park until Kondanya gave rise to the eye of Dhamma. Anya Kondanya he sees. And what was the essence of Kondanya's enlightenment? Sees that everything that arises has a cause. Whatever arises from a cause will cease from a cause. So there is a way of practice, seeing, understanding this causal nature. And this is what led to the first Sotapanna in the history of Buddhism, after the beginning of Sangha on that day, through listening to this discourse that we chanted a few minutes ago. So I'd like to stop with these a few words on the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta this evening.